Alright, so welcome everyone. Holding by Noahide laws, and we're going to start speaking about dietary laws and going to speak about Min HaChai. Seemingly most important mitzvah for Noahide when it comes to the dietary laws. Right, and that is going to be what we call Min HaChai. Min HaChai means you're eating a limb taken from a live animal. Now, you might think, okay, if I'm talking about Min HaChai, so maybe it's only that. Maybe, there are no other ramifications. Maybe, it's only what we'll call a narrow prohibition. Could be. Right, but actually, a number of details. First of all, where does the Gemara learn? We have to remember, where does the Gemara learn the Noahide laws? Genesis chapter 2, verse 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, from every tree of the garden, you have to eat. Now, Min HaChai, eating a limb from a live animal, besides being derived from this verse, also, a direct command in Noah after the flood. Now, two reasons. We got two reasons why it's repeated. Remember, nothing's ever repeated in the Torah for no reason. And the tie to another Talmudic debate. And that question was, as Talmud says in Edrin 57a, 59b, was Adam allowed to eat meat? Right? No discussion. Was first man allowed to eat meat or not? So Rashi and Tosfos over there is in Edrin 57a, Tosfos 56b. Right, both hold, as the Talmud states, all 7 laws given to Adam. They were given to Adam at the time of creation. Now, what would that include? It would include Min HaChai, eating a limb from a live animal. Now, why is that relevant? It's only going to be relevant if he's allowed to eat meat. If Adam's permitted to eat meat, if he's not permitted to eat meat, it's a moot point. Right? We wouldn't even be discussing this. So according to Rashi and Tosfos over there, Adam's allowed to eat meat, but, and there's always a but, and that is, he's not allowed to kill animals for food. In other words, they're only allowed to eat animals that died on their own. Not allowed to hunt. Not allowed to hunt the animals. When are they allowed to hunt animals? Only after the flood. Then they're allowed to kill animals, certainly for food. Now, it comes on the Rambam, Laws of Kings, chapter 9, halacha 1. And the Rambam says that where's the Gemara? Where does the Talmud derive Noahide laws from? Right? From Genesis, as we mentioned. But the Rambam holds is only an asmachta. What's an asmachta? It's a supporting allusion to the existence of the laws prior to the time of Noah. In other words, it's not a clear-cut source for derivation. So if you look at the text itself, the Rambam proposes man's not given the permission to eat meat until after the flood. Right? In other words, the only permissibility is after the flood. So therefore, Adam could not have been commanded regarding Min HaChai. So he disagrees. He disagrees over here. And the fact that it's only after the flood. Man's allowed to eat meat, and it's forbidden to eat Min HaChai. But they do agree, the Rambam, Rashi, and Tosfos all agree that Adam was given the right to use animals for any useful tasks. As the Torah tells me, Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God blessed them, said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, i.e. birds, You know, every little thing that creeps on the earth. What does that mean? That means man's allowed to use animals for useful tasks, not allowed to abuse them, which we're going to speak about. So, if I wanted to make a fedora hat from minks, I can do it. The PETA, pet activists, whatever you call them, they're going to jump up and down and say, hey, what did that mink ever do to deserve to have its skin ripped off? Because I want a hat. I want to make it into a hat. Or I want alligator boots. Can I skin the gator for the boots? Why not? Oh, that's cruel. Why is that cruel? It's for my usage. I can't abuse animals. We're going to see. We're not allowed to abuse animals. But this, if it's got a usage, I can do it. So the permission, however, did not end to killing animals for food. Allowed to kill animals. We have power over animals. But here you're not allowed to kill for food. As the Talmud says, Sanhedrin 59a. Now, according to this, we're allowed to use animals for our needs. But killing them, different issue. So that's a different issue. Now, the question would be, $1.5 million question is with A. So, well, the question would be, what about Adam? Is Adam allowed to cause pain or suffering to animals? Right? And this comes up quite a bit. I get asked this question a lot, about what we're allowed to do, what non-Jews are allowed to do when it comes to animals. Now, the prohibition against animal cruelty is known as Sar, Baalei, Chaim. Right? Cruelty to animals, that is going to apply to Noahide. Going to apply to Noahides over here. Now, we're going to see how it applies. We're going to see in much greater detail. Not today, but we'll see in the future. But we need to know if it applies in the relevance to Min HaChai. Right? Does Min HaChai come underneath this category of Tzar Baalei, of cruelty to animals? Now, everybody agrees at the time of Noah. Right? Man has agreed. Is given permission to kill animals for the sake of food. Because it says, the fear of you, the dread of you, shall be upon every beast of the earth, every bird of the sky, put everything that moves on the earth, put all fish of the sea into your hands, they are given. In other words, we're right to take food, to use it for food. Every moving thing has life is yours for food, just like the green herbage. Just like plants, you can use for food, animals you can use for food. Now, what about this prohibition of Min HaChai? So it's given here for the first time. That's the question. Or is it given in light of permission to kill animals for food? So if it's given because we're allowed to kill animals for food, that would make sense. Right? Because even if you want to tell me, maybe, it's cruel over here, but it's for food. So what's the problem? Maybe it should be permitted. But what does it say? What does the Torah tell me? Genesis chapter 9, verse 4. But flesh with its soul, its blood you shall not eat. The Gemara, Sanhedrin 59a, that explains as opposed to prohibition of Min HaChai, of eating a limb from a live animal. Now, so we have to understand what the connection is here. What's the connection between taking a limb from a live animal and the verses over here? So Min HaChai is a paraphrase in the Talmud of the source for the prohibition. Meaning, it's a specific way of referring to the law. But, of course, it's always a but. And the but is, there's something else going on. There's a weakness over here. Because how do we translate it? Translate Min HaChai is a limb torn from a living animal. Right? That's how we would translate it. Problem is, it's a bad translation. What does the Torah tell me? The Torah tells me, again, Genesis chapter 9, verse 4, flesh with soul, its blood, you shall not eat. So what does the Gemara say? The Gemara rephrases the prohibition and calls it Aver Min HaChai. Right? That's what it calls it. Aver Min HaChai. Which literally means a limb or a part from the living. So, okay, now, let's understand what it means over here. What is a limb or a part? What did the Torah tell me? Flesh. What does flesh mean? Flesh can be a lot of different things. We're going to have to narrow it down. Because the Hebrew word for flesh is sometimes used specifically for meat, i.e. Basar. Basar means meat. Can also be translated as flesh. But here it can mean any part edible of the animal. It's taken from the animal. Now, what does the Talmud call it? It calls it an aver. Right? What does an aver mean? It's a part. Literally, it means a part. Right? But how are we going to look at the broader meaning? Right? The broader meaning for the word flesh. So what's the point? The point is, the prohibition is prohibiting anything separated from an animal while it lives. Any part of the animal. Now it says, Aver min. What does min mean? From. Doesn't say anything about material being taken or torn from a live animal. So, what does it mean over here? It means a method where the material is separated from the animal. Maybe you tell me that's what it means, something separated over here. Taken apart or taken away from the animal. Well, that wouldn't make any sense. That would be totally irrelevant. Why? Because if you look at a limb, right, if you look at a limb over here, a limb remains forbidden even if it falls from an animal on its own. What would I think? I might think I have to cut it off. Right? Eating a limb from a live animal means I cut it off. Who says? Maybe it fell on its own. Right? Even milk and eggs might be included over here, but also be prohibited. Right? Falls by itself, comes out by itself, let's say. But we can't learn anything out yet. We can't make such a distinction. And then we're going to see later. We're going to see the next one over here. Now, what does it mean? HaChai literally means the living. Now, also problematic. This is a problem in general with translation. It's very broad. Really way too broad. Why? Because again, what does the Torah tell me? Qualification. Right? Because it says, but flesh with its soul, its blood you shall not eat. Again, Genesis chapter 9, verse 4. Now, what does it say? We're going to be very specific here. It says flesh, and it says blood. Right? Talking about the animal. Now, there's a tremendous distinction over here. Right? For example, Jews consuming horse blood. That was very common. Right? Let's say a Jew consumed horse blood. There's an injunction against eating blood. Jews not allowed to eat blood. What's the punishment for eating blood? Kares, being spiritually cut off. Losing your portion of the world to come. Now, if a Jew would eat the horse, the meat of horse meat, that's forbidden. Different reason. Totally different reason. Because there's a prohibition against eating the meat of non-kosher species. What's the punishment? Lashes. Rabbinic lashes. You get whooped for such a thing. But that's a different issue. That's talking about I'm not allowed to eat that species. What? Totally different thing. What's a different prohibition? More severe prohibition. Than eating the thing itself. Now, what does our verse tell us? Our verse says flesh, with its soul, with its blood. What is it teaching you? A prohibition of Min HaChai. Where does it apply? What apply to? Applies to animals for which the Torah makes legal distinction between flesh and their blood. Right? But the Torah is going to make that distinction. As it says in Sanhedrin 59a to 59b, the Torah is going to make such a distinction. Now, there are a lot of animals where the Torah makes no distinction between flesh and blood. Just can't eat them. And it's forbidden. Meaning, the entire animal. In all of its parts. Doesn't make any distinctions. It says, don't eat this, don't eat that. We'll see. We'll see what's going to apply. It's all one prohibition. Right? Don't eat this. Whatever the animal is, don't eat all of it. Don't eat the sinews, don't eat the blood, nothing. Since the Torah doesn't make any distinctions else, then Min HaChai does not apply. Right? In other words, if the Torah tells me by itself, don't eat horses. I don't need the Torah to tell me, well, what about a limb from a horse? Torah didn't tell me that. Torah said don't eat a horse. So Min HaChai is not going to apply over here because the thing's forbidden. It's forbidden anyway. I'm talking about kosher animals. Right? I'm talking about non-kosher animals. There are two things. You're telling me the blood is forbidden, right? The flesh with its soul, with its blood. But what if it's prohibited in general? Right? Don't eat this type of bird. And what about if I plucked off a limb and I ate it? Doesn't apply, because the whole thing is forbidden. So now the question is going to be, okay, if it's forbidden, the animal's forbidden anyway. So what am I talking about? The flesh, the blood, and all that? I don't need it. So which animals does it apply? Which animals does Min HaChai over here going to apply? First of all, it does not apply to shrutzim. What are shrutzim? Crafts of 8 animals mentioned by the Torah, Leviticus chapter 11, verses 29 to 30. Short but creepy, crawly things. I'm sure people are going to be bothered by this, that they can't eat them. Right? We'll see what they are. But there's no distinction between their blood and their flesh at all. It just says, don't eat them. You're not allowed to eat them. Everyone agrees that common mouse, most likely the monitor lizard, among these 8 creatures. But there's a disagreement to the remaining 6. Right? Not clear what the remaining 6 are. So we're going to go through them and just explain the different opinions as to the identity of these shrutzim. Of these creepy crawly things, whatever you want to call them. First, there's a cholet. Talmud describes as a predatory, burrowing animal. Tunnels underneath houses. It says in Shabbos 107a. So how do they interpret it? Either a weasel, an ermine, a marten, a mole rat, according to the Aruch, or a Targum Onkelos. The Aramaic translation, those Vajantim say it's a rat. Targum Yonasan Ben Ruziel says it's a field mouse. Alright, something, in that category. Then you got an achbar. Most agree an achbar is a mouse. A regular mouse. A common mouse. Again, I'm sure everyone's going to say, wow, I can't eat a mouse. Upset. So upset over here. Right? Some say it's also a rat. Could be a rat. But most say it's talking about a mouse. A mouse. A tzav, third one. Talmud Chulin, 127a, implies it's similar to a salamander. Or a snake. Some say it's a toad. This is the opinion of Rashi, Leviticus chapter 11, verse 29, neither 56a, that a tzav is really a toad. In the Mishnah, in Taharis, chapter 5, Mishnah 1, and many of the early commentators compare it to a frog, right? That's what it seems like. I would say the majority of commentators learn it out as a frog, some sort of frog. Some say the Mamalois get like a medrash, and it's very thrilling. The Mishnah says it's a tortoise. Okay, different here. Then you get an anak, an anika. What's an anika? learn now where the Radak says it's like some sort of hedgehog, right? It's either a hedgehog or some sort of a beaver, or Rav Gaon calls it a gecko. A koach, fifth thing over here is a koach, which is a lizard, according to the Radak. Then in the commentary says most likely a monitor lizard. Okay. Take a look at Rav Gaon over there. He speaks about it. Another species of a lizard or a great gecko. Seventh one is a chomet, a snail. Rashi says it's a snail. Many other comments identify it as a skunk. Right, I guess it's a skunk. And then you got a tinshemes. Tinshemes is either a mole, Rashi in 63a, or some sort of burrowing lizard. Now, further things that are exempted from the prohibition of Min HaChai. What is that? All sea creatures. Insects, arachnids, snakes, frogs, lizards. Therefore, it'd be okay to consume limbs from dolphins, crabs, lobsters before the animal has actually expired. All right, that prohibition doesn't apply to them. But it's probably better to do it in a way that minimizes the suffering of the animal. Because again, you got a prohibition of cruelty to animals, Chaim, that applies to non-Jews. Now, interesting enough, just as a side point, I'm sure most people are aware, people love to eat lobster. I grew up in Massachusetts, so, people love to eat lobster. How do you cook lobster? You cook lobster, you take its claws and you close them, you put like a rubber band or whatever so they can't open them, and you stick them in boiling water. That's how they die. Can't imagine how painful that is. I never really thought about it, back in the day. Never really thought about it. But is there anything cruel to that? Most people won't care. They'll say, what do I care? That's why I eat it. They boil it alive. All right, sounds pretty nasty. So something like that, even if you tell me I can do such a thing and eat it while it's still alive, you certainly can't kill it that way. Right? It's still, even if you're going to eat it, you can't kill it that way. Now, there are other ramifications as well. Rodents. Now, the problem here is it's not clear. When we say all shrutzim are creepy, crawly things. Right? So there's a doubt of what they are. Not clear, in all these cases, exactly what they are. So therefore, we treat all rodents as if Min HaChai applies to them. The only exception is the mouse. Because it's certain the mouse is a sheretz, and Min HaChai doesn't apply to it. Right? It's going to be the only difference. But basically everything else we're not sure of, we'll say it applies. Now, what about seals, otters, walruses? I'm sure this is very common. People eat them. But they all live in the water, right? They live in the water. They also live on the land. Do we look at sea creatures that are exempted from Min HaChai? Do we look at them as sea creatures or as land animals, right? As mammals. So the question would be, okay, they come on land, but where do they live most of the time? Maybe we say they live most of the time in the sea. They're like sea creatures. Maybe not. Comes on the Rambam. The Rambam and the laws of forbidden things to eat, chapter 2, halacha 12. He says sea lions are sea creatures. So they're exempt. They're exempt from Min HaChai. Chulin 127a says if a mammal can travel on land on its own power, it's considered a land animal, according to Jewish law. So Mishnah in Kalim, chapter 17, Mishnah 13, that the carcass of a sea lion subjected to certain types of ritual impurity don't apply to sea animals. So he's learning it's a mammal. Right? So a sea lion must be a land animal, according to that. Goes on to Satan's Paneach on the Rambam, and he says that these rebuttals rejects. So because of these questions on the Rambam, he rejects the Rambam over here. So what do we hold practically? What do we hold practically over here? So practically speaking, we hold that seals, otters, walruses, similar creatures are land animals. Therefore, if a person ripped one of their limbs or ate their flesh while it's still alive, they are subject to Min HaChai. Now, what is called flesh? What is called flesh over here that we spoke about before? Because the verse tells me Basar, which we translate as flesh, from a living animal. So that means one's only liable if I eat flesh from a living animal. But again, what does that mean? That's why you always need rabbinic interpretation. That's why you need oral law. Because I can't derive anything from it. It says flesh. Flesh can mean anything over here. Right? It can apply in many different ways. Not only that, any prohibition against eating something only applies if the item is considered fit for consumption. Now again, how are we going to determine this? How are we going to know what it is? That you need to go obviously to an expert, to a posek, a expert rabbinic authority who knows. So here's a guide, right? We're going to give a guide over here. So here we're dealing with something called Basar. Basar means flesh, Basar means meat, for the sake of being obligated, over here. Now, if I eat anything from a living animal, it's prohibited. Even if one doesn't incur punishment, it still could be prohibited. Bones are a good example. Bones are not considered fit for human consumption. You can try, probably break your teeth. Ray, I'll give you a project. Right? You can try eat some really hard meat bones. And if you need dental surgery, don't blame me. Right? You're not going to eat bones. Not going to happen. They're not fit for human consumption. And therefore, bones are not considered, they're not considered flesh. Right? They're not considered basar. They're not considered flesh here. What about tendons and sinews? Right? Even though it's not considered flesh, not considered basar, consumption is prohibited. You're not allowed to eat it. Right? But you're not getting punishment here. You're not allowed to eat it, but you're not getting punished over here. Hooves, horns, feathers. Right? What about that? Right? What about that? You gotta think, wow, how can someone eat them anyway? Right? Right? That would be a whole question. That would be a whole question over here. But these parts, even their soft inner parts, they're not called meat. Right? Doesn't sound like meat, so it's not called meat over here. So therefore, Min HaChai, not going to apply. Not going to apply. But you should eat them. Right? In other words, we're going to say, if it's a forbidden animal, nothing to talk about. So we're talking about here even flesh of a kosher animal, let's say. But you shouldn't eat them anyway. What about flesh of birds? Now, there's a prohibition that applies to birds, as it does to land animals, because again, meat is meat. When we say you're not allowed to mix milk and meat, it means chicken also. Why chicken and milk you're not allowed to eat? So we all, because we're worried, if you eat chicken and milk, you'll forget and eat red meat with milk. Right? That's the total prohibition. Right? That's going to be the total prohibition. Right? So therefore, there's going to be a decree. There's a decree of eating chicken and milk at the same time eating meat, red meat, and milk. Because I'm worried if I eat chicken and milk, I'll forget. So here, prohibition also applies to birds, but you're not liable to be punished, right, for flesh, for bird flesh. What about hides and skins? They're also sometimes called basar, and sometimes not, depends. So Min HaChai that may arise regarding hides or skins. Again, you're going to have to go to someone who's an expert in this, in the Noahide laws to see. Right? To see what that, to see what it is. Right? To see if that applies. I know why my camera keeps going on here. Anyway, to see why that applies. Right? The Rambam in Forbidden Foods, chapter 4, Mishnah, Halacha 18. So the Rambam learns hides and skins are not considered fit for human consumption. That even Min HaChai shouldn't apply. Right? Even in a case where even fully cooked, they made appetizing, whatever the case is, also wouldn't apply. In certain hides, maybe soft hides are considered meat, and that could be, right? That could be, you might be liable. You might be liable for that. What else? Placenta. I'm sure that's also very common, right? A placenta, expelled naturally by the animal, certainly can't be eaten. It shouldn't be eaten. Sorry. It can be eaten, but not included in the prohibition of Min HaChai. If it's removed from the animal before it gives birth, then it would be prohibited, right? Then it could be forbidden. Last thing here is about blood. Right, what about blood? Blood's not included in the prohibition over here. And we said before, the Hebrew word Basar, flesh, is blood. And it includes almost all part of the animal, maybe even blood. Right? But there's a distinction. What does the Torah tell me? Flesh with its soul, it's blood. Two different things. So it comes on the Rambam, in the case of Mishnah. Right? In the case of Mishnah also, in the Laws of Kings, chapter 9, Halacha 10. And based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin 59a, that this prohibits meat taken from an animal while it's living, but not blood. What about if you take out blood? I mean, this would be pretty gross. Unless you're a vampire wannabe. Right? What are you doing? Oh, that's only human blood. All right, sorry. Let's say you took out blood from an animal while alive. Sounds pretty nasty, but okay, let's say someone did it. Blood is allowed to be consumed by non-Jews. By Noahides, even if it's taken over here from an animal while it's alive. Blood, the prohibition of blood does not apply. Right? Doesn't apply over here. So therefore they can eat it. So that wouldn't be a problem. So what do we see? We see there are a number of things as part of the body, as part of the body of an animal. What is considered flesh and what is not considered flesh. Right? Flesh, is mentioned, obviously, needs sanctions because it's a broad thing. It's a very broad thing. So therefore, all these other things are going to apply. From tendons, sinews, hooves, there's all these things. The question is, does it apply or doesn't apply? Right? That's the question. Yeah, so that's the idea. Some aspects of Min HaChai. I guess next week, well, actually it's not going to be next week, probably in 2 weeks, because I'm going to take next week off because of the fast of the 9th of Av. Right, but I guess in 2 weeks speak more about Min HaChai and how it applies. Again, more detail also. About Chaim, animal cruelty. So yeah, any questions? Oh, there we are. Any questions? Any questions on any of that? All right, go ahead. If you want to unmute yourself, it might be easier.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No problem. Go ahead.
Okay, so Bass Pro Shops, they serve alligator meat. And does Min HaChai apply to alligators?
It's a land animal, no?
Alligators?
Oh no, they swim in the ocean. No, also right. What would the status be by? That's a good point. Just seeing if you're awake here. Does that apply? Does that apply? Question is, it's got the same status. What do we say? Let me see over here, 1 second. Do we say it's got the same status as seals, otters, and walruses? Right, they live in the water as well as on land. The question is, do alligators live on land? Right, that would be the question. I would think it probably comes underneath this category. You know, they're probably considered land animals. You know, even though they're in the water, but probably have the same status as seals, otters, and walruses. So yeah, it's probably they're probably considered land animal, and therefore, yeah, would be subject to Min HaChai. Eating it, you know, it shouldn't be an issue. I mean, people want to eat it. Sounds kind of gross, but people want to eat alligators. They should be allowed to, right? Certainly for non-Jews. Yeah. Wait a minute. Is an alligator considered a lizard? I don't know. Let me see here. I don't think so. I don't know if it's considered. I'm not sure if it's considered a lizard or not. Its lizard-like appearance. It's a reptile. Right? It's considered, I guess, a reptile. They're lizard-shaped reptiles. I guess, yeah, if it's considered, is it considered a lizard? Lizard seems like not. You know, they have similar body shape, same class, but they're not related. Right? That doesn't seem like they're the same. Doesn't seem like they are. From what I see over here. Even though, it seems that even though they're from the same family, it seems like they're very different. That's what I see over here. Let's look into it further, but that's what it sounds like. That they might be considered lizards in some way, in body shape, and they belong to the same class, but they're not related. They're different. They're the same class, but different. What's it called? Different order. Oh wow, it's bringing back bad memories. You know, biology. But yeah, it would seem that it's a lizard. You know, and you know, it might be classified as a lizard, but it's a different order. So even though it's the same, I don't know what they call it, the same. The same class, they're a different order. So, question is, does that mean they're similar, they're related? They're related in some ways and not. So if you tell me they're the same class and order, I'd say that, yeah, that they're the same. But it doesn't seem like they're the same. Doesn't seem like they're the same. So, you know, I have to look into it further. Would we say that since it's similar enough, we call it a lizard, but it's different. It's not the same. I have to look into it further, but I would think it's not. You know, I could be wrong. Whatever, I'll look into it further. Yeah, second question.
Also, Rabbi, I was curious about something else.
Okay.
I saw something somewhere about there's supposedly a catfish species that could wiggle and move on its fins very short distances between bodies of water, like out
Okay.
like maybe. But obviously, it doesn't make sense. Fins aren't made for land travel, but those still would be water animals, right? They spend their time on this. They spend their lives in water.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I just wanted to verify that.
Yeah, they're most likely it's in the water more than on land. No.
True.
So it's probably called more of a fish than it's on land. I mean that's what I would think. I could be wrong. Whatever. Like I said, I have to research this a little bit. I would think by some of these animals, they're in the water much more than they're on land. If you look at, what were the animals here? A seal, an otter, and a walrus. Now, I'm not a world expert here in animals per se. So I guess you can take what I say with a grain of salt. But I would think that seals, otters, and walruses are in the water more than they're on land. Right? That's what I would think. Right? But according to this, we hold that they're considered land animals. So that says what I said. Just blows that out of the water because if they're on land, and they function on land, doesn't matter how much they are in the water. The fact they come up on land and can be on land for a long time, right, can signify that they're land animals. Just because they're in the water a lot doesn't necessarily mean they're considered a water animal. Right? That's what I would say. But I would think, and again, without knowing anything, I would think if they're in the water, they're in the water a lot more. Maybe, I don't know, when it's freezing cold, are they in the water as much? Maybe not, I don't know. But I would think they're more in the water than not. That's what I would think. But the fact that they go on land over here would classify it as a land animal. It doesn't, even if it's on land, not that much time. Right? We see over here that even if that would be the case, then it wouldn't be considered. It certainly wouldn't be considered a land animal. I just want to look up something here. Let's just see 1 second. Yeah, they're called mammals. They're definitely called mammals. Interesting. Yeah, let me just look up one other thing here. Okay. All right, seems like they're on the land quite a bit also. That's the way it looks. So I guess that's why it's called a mammal. That's what I would say on that. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I guess there's no questions. Then I'm going to sign out. Like I said, next Sunday, It's going to be a fast day, so I'm going to be out of commission. So we'll plan this for 2 weeks. Put out a notice next week, but we'll put this off for for another week, and then then we'll continue. So I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions, feel free. Shoot me an email. Otherwise, I'm going to sign out. Wish everyone a good middle of the day, almost end of the day for me, and everyone have a great rest of the week.